You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by addclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com and sign up for free webinars and online events today. Hello and welcome back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris, and as a productivity and ADHD coach, I help overwhelmed professionals reduce procrastination, improve time management, and get more done with less effort so that they have more time, energy, and even more money for what they love most. So you guys know I'm a woman with ADHD myself, so I get the struggle, I get the challenge, and I can absolutely tell you that there is life on the other side, and I know you can get there yourselves as well. You can learn more about me and what I do and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. Today I have Aron Croft with me. Welcome, Aron.
Thanks, Lynn. It's so awesome to be here.
I have a lot of fun chatting with you, so I'm really looking forward to having you with us today. So tell our listeners a little bit about you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm 40, I'm bald. Okay, no, sorry, not about that.
Not your dating profile, no.
I don't want a third marriage on the thing. So I'm on marriage number 2. We're gonna keep that going.
Yes.
Don't worry, sweetie. There's no dating profile. So on my side, hi, I'm Aron. I'm the CEO of Hidden ADHD Coaching, and I basically 7 years ago, I would not have expected to be on this podcast because I was broke, divorced, and earning minimum wage despite having a Harvard degree. And in the 7 years since, I got diagnosed with ADHD. I got promoted 4 times in 6 years, and I built this business to a following of over 100,000 people. The road was not as nearly as straight as that summary makes it sound like, but that's some of the things that I'll look forward to talking about with Lynn and sharing with you today.
And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy talking with you about. And I think one of the things that our listeners will enjoy hearing about is that the road is not straight, right? And despite what you may see kind of online or, what pieces of different people and professionals you see, nobody's life is really a straight line. And when you have ADHD, to expect it to be a straight line is setting yourself up for frustration and disappointment and worse.
Yeah, that would have been really helpful like 39 years ago, Lynn. Thanks.
Where was I then? Right. I'd like to tell you I wasn't old enough to know that then, but I think I might have been. So knowing it and really internalizing it and kind of surrendering to it, though, are completely different things. So you can know that intellectually, that what you see isn't really all that there is, but it's completely different to really internalize that and accept that in a way that it doesn't impact how you feel about yourself.
No, it's so true. And I think one of the things that really opened up the floodgates of productivity for me, and this was really only about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, was, do you know, like that goal to be efficient?
Mm-hmm.
I used to like look at every hour, and some hours I would win, other hours I would lose. And no matter what, I would get to the end of the day, and very occasionally I would have won the day. And it was like, yay. But 90% of the time, really more, I lost and I would beat myself up. And, then I realized that like, that's not realistic to be efficient for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And I switched from trying to be efficient to being strategic.
Yes.
And like, I'm not that hard of a worker. I get a ton of results, but that's because of strategy, not because of grit and willpower and discipline. And I think when I made that shift in my head, like, I'm never going to be the just type A overachiever, workaholic 7 days a week person. Like, I'm a little bit jealous of them just because it's such a distant idea for me that I could never even fathom. But I think even just realizing that I could still be successful without doing that was a game changer in terms of like the non-straight line.
And that's huge. And that's something that I work on with my clients all the time, right? It's not about output. It's not about working harder or what I always call like pedaling faster, right? It's about using your time better and strategic is the right word. I always say it intentionally, using your time thoughtfully and intentionally, but you can't do that like 12 hours a day, right? I am married to the most linear, the most logical, the most born organized kind of guy in the world. He's an engineer. I talk about my husband all the time. I don't think he realizes how much I talk about him. We've been married for 33 years. All of the stuff, that organizational stuff, the time management stuff, the productivity stuff that I have always been vexed by is stuff that just absolutely comes naturally to him. It's like he got a gene that I didn't get. And when we were first married, I grew up in a house full of ADHD. So kind of, I thought everybody was like this to some degree. But when we got married, I kept trying to like emulate him, right? I kept trying to do what he did that I thought was what was giving him results. And some of it is what gives him results, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for me. And that doesn't mean that I should try to fit myself into his box. Nobody is completely productive and efficient all day long. Even if you have a 10-hour work day, right? You've got to know that you've got a few hours to make the most of that work day, right? A few peak hours, a few strategic hours. You want to make the rest of the hours not suck as much as they possibly can, but you can't expect yourself to be kind of pedal to the metal all day long. Nobody's brain works that way, whether you have ADHD or not. So it really is about like figuring out how to work strategically, how to work in ways that work for you, and not like comparing yourself and beating yourself up for not being able to do things the way someone else seems to be able to do them.
Love it.
I think it's something that I see I work with so many people who come to me and say, I've tried David Allen's getting things done system. I've tried this. Yep. I've tried that. I've tried the other thing. And, either none of it works for me or help me make it work for me. And that always makes me smile. Right. And kind of laugh. And then I go, yeah, that's not what I do.
I mean, I think that there's got to be a disproportionate size of piled up, unused attempts at productivity systems among ADHDers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, how many, we all have these like private stashes, and maybe we've even kept them or we've sent them to the recycle bin of like every different system that we've tried. Like we went and did the Covey rolls and goals and the first thing first, and then
the quadrant and the Eisenhower quadrant and and
then we did all that, and then we bought this journal and that journal. I mean, we must, we all have like these, skeleton piles of
and it is like a graveyard, right? It's where your dreams of productivity and time management go to die. That's how it feels.
You're like, wait a minute. Okay, can the productivity system teach me to be productive enough to keep up with the goddamn productivity system? And the answer is no.
Right. There's a horse in a carriage there somewhere, a chicken and an egg. I think that's part of what is so hard, I think, for so many of us, right? Is what other people do isn't necessarily going to work for us. And honestly, I mean, most people, ADHD or not, don't just plug themselves into someone else's system and it's like, putting the right disk in your computer to make it run properly. For most of us, I used to use this metaphor or simile. It's like, trying to run an Apple program on a PC, right? It just doesn't compute because your operating system isn't made that way. You've got to do what works for you. And that the whole comparison thing is the part that I just wish we could help people understand is, it's not about you being like someone else or as good as someone else. It's about you being a better version of you all the time. And when you can accept that and you can be okay with that and tune into what's going better, what's getting easier, what's, where you're making progress, then you're going to start to see what works for you. It's rarely going to be, a book, a system, a app, and, particular thing that you purchase.
Yeah. And
jump into your whole heart and soul and every hope and dream that you have hanging on this thing, right? This is the thing.
Yeah, right. Totally. I just need to spend more money on the system. And you hit it as well with comparison. My wife is a psychologist, tends to bring up that quote to me, like comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And, we can't just plug those things in. And so I had another great thought, but ADHD, I lost it. So.
Oh, sorry. They're like ghosts in the wind. Sometimes they just blow away, and a lot of times they come back. So interrupt me if it comes back. So we were talking about your journey, and I think your journey, if someone sees you now and they assume that you, who you are now and how you're showing up now on social media, on the web, on this podcast, anywhere, is who you are and where you've been. And I think that's part of what, I know we've talked about it at length. We both really want people, first of all, to stop doing and to realize not only is it not healthy and helpful for you, it's also incorrect. So tell our listeners a little bit about your journey, however much you care to share, because I think it's inspirational. And I think it's, most of us are going to find a piece of ourselves in there somewhere. And I hope it gives somebody hope.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can.
No pressure or anything.
Totally. So you got the highlights. So I can give you kind of the quick overview, right? So I was a naturally good test taker growing up, and I had a really good social support structure going through school. I happened to just have a group of really smart, ambitious friends who would always invite me to study with them and do homework with them. I had two older sisters who were really good at school, and they built really positive reputations with teachers that I got to step into. And I had parents that were on me about doing well. Anyway, short version being, I somehow managed to graduate number one in my high school and get into Harvard, like sound the trumpets. Aaron's
Wow.
life is set. Aaron's life is set forever, right?
Right.
And, it was supposed to be the start of my successful life. And in the end, getting into Harvard was the start of my downfall. And for 15 years, I failed out of my first 6 jobs and businesses. I dropped out of Harvard twice, including once to a remote island off the coast of New Zealand but that's another story for another time, before finally graduating. And, I really bounced around so much to the point that my resume looked like Swiss cheese. And I just kept asking myself, like, what's wrong with me? And, so finally I go and I get a master's degree in coaching psychology. And I told my mom and my wife that it was because, I have this desire to be a coach, which, and to talk in a really high voice. But so I had this desire to be a coach. And, that part was true. But what I didn't say, which was more true, was I just wanted to figure myself out. Like, why could I not get anything done? And you have to understand, at this point, still I'm in my early 30s, still undiagnosed. And, I enjoyed the master's degree and it was good. And I kind of, I did better than I did in college with it. And, but at this point, I'm still in a minimum wage job. And, I still had some marital tension because I was, all my old habits of procrastination, working nights and weekends to catch up were all still in place. And, but I'm like, okay, this is good. Postmasters, I'm going to build my life. And then in one bombshell weekend, my wife tells me that she's not happy and that she's been having an affair.
Oh my.
And yeah. So fast forward a little bit.
That's a lot, right? And I know there are people listening who can relate to that. Absolutely.
Right.
But it was a pivot point for you, right?
It was a pivot. So fast forward, and I've got my worldly possessions in suitcases, and I am moving in to a shared house with 4 other acquaintances, and where I'm renting a room. And so I'm in the house and I'm unpacking my stuff, post divorce, and Billy comes and jumps on my king size bed. Billy's a 26-year-old tech support agent from Vietnam who's, in the house. And I'm like, oh, what's up, Billy? And he looks awfully comfortable. And then it hits me. Billy hasn't jumped on my king size bed he's jumped on his half of our king size bed because renting half of a king size bed was all I could afford at that point in my life.
Oh, geez.
So, then of course terror strikes, and our ADHD brain works well under terror and pressure. And that's how I got through high school and middle school, with just epic procrastination. So terror strikes, and I finagle my way in a few months into a better paying job. And then after 7 months in that job, I finagle my way into a new company with a raise as well. I'm like, oh, finally, Aron's life is taking off. And so I'm in this new job, and then history freaking repeats itself.
Yeah.
I'm under new hire probation, 3 months in, after, the honeymoon phase. They tell me your work's not good enough, and you need to redo all the crap that you've done over the past few months because the client's not happy. I was in consulting, and, you can't charge extra time, and you can't do it during business hours. You need to stay late and redo this work. And I tell you, Lynn, I was at the edge of, I had no gas left in the tank.
Yeah.
And I was like, I physically can't do what they're asking me to do. And so I freaked out, called a friend who had mentioned ADHD. And I was like, I knew Adderall could help you stay up late, even though I'd never tried it. I was like, dude, I'm going to get fired. I need to stay up late every day this week. I need you to let me have some Adderall. He's like, no, I'm not allowed to. I pressured and told him that, my life was on the line, and I was, all this. So anyway, so he gives in, which no one should do, and don't try this at home. But anyway, so I go Monday to the office, and then, kind of midday, I'm like, oh, I should pop this Adderall so that I can stay, late. And I pop it, walk around for half an hour. I come back, and I swear to God, Lynn, I entered a parallel freaking dimension. I could look at boring PowerPoint and Excel spreadsheets and work on them, because they're important, not because they're fun or interesting.
Right.
And I was literally it was like looking around the room, like, does anyone else know what's going on here? And then it hit me. This is what everyone had been talking about. It's like a blind person suddenly gets sight, and they're like, oh, this is purple that everyone kept talking about. It was like, oh, this is what people said when they were like, Aron, just work on your assignment. That you could focus on command. Who knew?
Right.
Yep. So I went and I got immediately met a psychiatrist shortly after that. I was like, okay, and got diagnosed. And then that really kind of set off my growth. And, in total, I got promoted 4 times in 6 years. I worked my way up to a senior manager role at an $8 billion Fortune 500 company. I got the chance to consult the Marriott, Johnson & Johnson, McDonald's, United Healthcare, and others in my consulting career. But, it was really the key catalyst for me was getting diagnosed and realizing that, that's what was in my way.
And that's amazing. And for some people, the kind of the medication experience is like that. My experience and the experience of a lot of people isn't quite that dramatic. I can usually see, at the end of the day, oh, that would have been easier if you'd have taken your medication, right? I'm not one that has that sort of, I've had clients say it feels like a light switch comes on, or they're putting the right glasses on for the first time.
Yep, that was it for me.
I think a lot of us aren't there or don't get that sort of response. And of course, there are a lot of people that can't or choose not to take medication. And one of the things that I think is really important for everyone to realize is the story is not about the magic of medication. That was a turning point for Aron, right? That was the beginning of an awakening for Aron, like a literal and a metaphorical awakening for Aron, like waking up his brain and waking him up to what was going on with him. Well, one of the things we talked about earlier before we started the recording is you need much more than medication, right? Everyone needs much more than medication. And I think a lot of us go into this hoping that pill is going to be the thing that is the magic solution and makes everything easy all of a sudden. But, for a lot of people, that even if they have that in the beginning, there's still like a honeymoon period with that, where after a little while, it isn't quite so magical anymore. you need to build your strategies. You need to know what works for you. You need to get your systems in place and your tools in place in a way that they work for you, not for anybody, not for David Allen, not for Stephen Covey, not for my husband, and not even for me, right? They need to be what works for you.
I wish you had told me that, like, right when I got diagnosed, and you would have saved me 2 years of wasted time.
Mm-hmm. We have to find these things out on our own sometimes. And I do think you may have even heard that from someone after you got diagnosed, but you weren't in the place at that time where either you were willing to accept it or you could really kind of get it, right?
Yeah. And you know what I think happened, Lynn? And this sounds really dumb being like a 34-year-old single divorcee male. But, I think what happened is I was just so amazed. I was so amazed that I was holding down a job, which, sounds a little bit crazy, but, I went from being an underachiever at work to being an average and then an above average performer. And I think, one, I was so amazed on that. And two, just to be really honest, I never properly supported myself.
Yeah.
And I think that experience at 34 was maybe what other people that don't have the checkered road that I've gone down might experience at 21 or 22 when they go out on their own. And so I'm holding in a job, I'm pulling in money, like I'm the man, and like I deserve all the rewards in the world for like being a responsible adult at 34. And so I just started smoking weed every night as a reward and playing video games and watching TV. But the problem was, and I only know this in retrospect, Lynn, is that my dopamine starved brain, given marijuana,
yep,
PlayStation 4 and like a massive 50-inch TV, like that's crack cocaine for it. And so what happened is that I started doing it every single night,
yep,
including weekends.
Yep.
And then I started preferring it over things like interacting with other people and being social.
Yep.
Anything that didn't have that level of just intense dopamine spike. Mm-hmm. And, that sort of isolation held me back for 2 years. It also put me into more depression because you can't isolate yourself like that. And it really kind of, it was eye-opening that I couldn't just medicate my way out of ADHD and have my life just be great.
Yeah, that's a big eye opener. And for you, it might have been smoking pot and gaming. For other people, it can be other stuff, right? It can be actual addictions, other kinds of substances, pornography, internet, whatever. But it can also be the things that we do to self-soothe, the things that we do to escape, avoid. For so many of my clients, it could be a stupid game on their smartphone that they get sucked into every night and, miss out on the rest of the world and actually don't refresh and recharge and get the break that they go on there feeling like they need and deserve. It shows up in some really unhealthy ways. So you need way more than medication. And it's really understanding you and what you need. I'm glad that happened to you at the age that it happened to you, because I think that happens to a lot of younger people, and they don't have the self-awareness or the knowledge about themselves or the maturity to be able to kind of pull themselves out of it, like you did. But it's hard, guys. This shit is not easy. And if it feels like it's not easy, that's because it's not easy, right? But it's doable. You can learn how your brain works, your brain, not, it's important to understand ADHD in general, of course, but that isn't all of it. You have to really know yourself, how your challenges show up, how your strengths show up, even like to the point of how you process information, how you organize things naturally. What works best for you naturally is what you're going to be able to stick with. It's what you're going to be able to keep going, and what's going to be able to support you for the long haul. So, I mean, do you have any strategies, any insights you want to share with our audience? I mean, your journey is remarkable for you to be where you are right now. And, one of the things I will tell a client or someone, and my own kids, is, and not to sound like your mom, but you should be really proud of yourself, right? For me to be proud of someone else is irrelevant because it's not about me, but you should be really proud of yourself. And I think in general, we need to look harder to find those reasons to be proud of ourselves. But that's,
Well said, Lynn. I mean, I think that what I would say really is, I'd bring up three things in answer to your question. So the first thing is that self-education about ADHD really opened things up for me. Yes. And I think I can tell you the reason I avoided it, because other people might avoid it for the same reason. So I avoided it because I didn't want basically what's called like med school disease, which is that when you read about symptoms, you adopt them. And I was like, I don't want to have any more problems. I already got enough. At 99 problems, I don't need any more. So, so I didn't want to read about them. However, when I finally took the plunge and started learning about the ADHD brain and its differences, I realized, to your analogy about the Apple or the on a PC software, that like it processes information differently. Yes. And because I'm an analytical systems strategic thinker, because I had to get through school using cleverness and strategy rather than hard work, I said, oh, this is a puzzle that I like. If our brains process information differently, well, then all I need to do is adapt all the productivity stuff that I've been studying and shaming myself for not implementing my whole life, and adapt them to fit the ADHD brain. And so that's recommendation number 2, which is adapt systems to fit an ADHD brain. Don't shame yourself for a system not working out of the box.
Absolutely. And you've got to adapt it for your ADHD brain, because what works for you, Aron, is going to be different than what works for me. And that's all part of that, understanding ADHD and how our brains work, and really understanding where you fit in all of that. I always say, like, your ADHD is as unique as your thumbprint, because you are as unique as your thumbprint. Your strengths, your tendencies, even your idiosyncrasies and quirks and those kind of weird ways that you work are all parts of your strengths and what's going to be natural for you and what's going to work for you. So I love that. So adapt what you adopt is, adapt what you learn and what you try to fit you. And then, don't beat yourself up about it when it doesn't work. I harp on this. We could do a whole nother podcast episode on this. That right there is something that I work on with clients, like a dog with a bone.
We have to. All our clients come to us with the same shame cycle that we learned as well. Yep. And we have to reverse the tide on that, because we can't achieve our own muchness if we're in that cycle all the time. And then, so the third thing, just to finish answering the question for the analytical people out there that need the completeness like I do, is to use best practices. And so what do I mean by that? So, and I think I'm going to share this story with you, Lynn, before we recorded the other day when we chatted, but so I finally am getting more productive, and I'm in this Fortune 500 job, and I do a journaling exercise, and I realize that one of the reasons that I can't go the extra mile in my job, like, again, I was performing well, but I wasn't going like top 1%, was because I didn't really effing care. I didn't want to get promoted. I didn't want to be CEO. And then so I said, well, what do I want? And what I really wanted was to be in the personal development space, share all the knowledge that I'd acquired over 20 years of trying to figure myself out and through my master's with other people. And this is the space I love. So I'm like, cool, I'm going to do that. There was a problem though. I wasn't actually doing anything about it.
Yeah.
It was on my to-do list to keep moving to start a blog and do all this stuff. And it wasn't happening. And so in a moment of frustration, at one point, I just started Googling how to be productive. And,
I guarantee you almost everybody listening to this has done that very, very same thing. Right? How to be productive with ADHD or something like that, right?
Yeah. And I'm going through and I'm opening all the results. This is a several hour kind of rabbit
Of
hole
course,
as we go
right.
down. And I'm
At
sure
least,
it was
right.
great procrastination
For
from something else.
right.
And, but I get to the end of it and I'm deflated because I'm like, I've read and tried every single one of these tactics, and I'm like, what the heck? What am I going to do? And then I had an epiphany. I said, I've tried all these tactics at various times, but I've never tried them all at once. And so I put together my Smash productivity system, which is basically just really concrete, normal advice that you would have. But it really took 4 key pillars of productivity. It put them into a 30-minute time chunk called a productivity unit. And it said, if you get really good at a 30-minute productivity unit where you're putting these 4 best practices and then others that we layer into place, you can then replicate that and start doing 2 productivity units and 4 and 6. And that's where my productivity really took off, really putting all those pieces into play at the same time, like a laser focused on getting shit done.
So turning those individual things into a system is that, and that's funny because I have a program as well that I built around what I call the 5 pillars of productivity, that cracks me up. But you have to take, it can't be, and no offense to anybody who puts them out there, because we all, share tips and tricks and hacks and all of those things, but it's not the individual tips, tricks, and hacks that are going to save your life. They're not the things that are going to help you level up and be able to perform at the level of your abilities consistently. It's the consistent application of that system, those pillars, those things that support you and get you, moving in the right direction. They support your ADHD and they let you, kind of be your best version of you. I love that. So the first one was adapt what you try, adapt it to fit you. The second one was don't shame yourself when stuff doesn't work. I always say, learn from it, take it and use it moving forward, and then use those best practices. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing this with us here. I always have fun talking with you, Aron. Tell the listeners a little bit about you again, where they can learn more about you, find you online, all that sort of stuff.
Sure. So, my brand is Hidden ADHD. You can find me on TikTok with over 100,000 people, but I'd recommend just Googling Hidden ADHD. You can go to the website. I've got awesome download. I've got a 5-day free email course on ADHD 101 crash course, kind of some of the core tactics to understand and leverage your ADHD brain. I've also got the 10 productivity mistakes that all ADHDers make. So those are really great resources. They're free. So if you just visit hiddenadhd.com, you can download those and continue your education.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aron. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you all for listening. You can continue the conversation, ask questions, share your thoughts in the ADHD Support Talk Facebook community, or join us online. And we really appreciate your attention as always. Thanks so much, Aron. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Lynn.
Take care.